So this may be the least groundbreaking thing I could possibly say, but I think that Edward Hopper was genius. And to be honest with you, my reasons for liking his work so much are pretty narcissistic. When I look at his work, it seems to almost bridge mediums to me. When I see a Hopper painting, particularly the ones that he's known for, it looks like he's painting street photographs. And so over the years of appreciating his work and studying it, I've developed this sort of artistic kinship with Edward Hopper. He tended to paint scenes exactly how I'd photographed them. He painted the same subject matter, similar locations. He lived in New York. A lot of his work is based around big cities. Simple scenes in big cities is basically my bread and butter. But even some of his work from outside the city, particularly in the coastal regions of New England, in Maine, Massachusetts, around the Cape, remind me of how I would go about composing those scenes of lighthouses and beaches and things like that too. So my point, what I want to do in this video is talk about the elements of a Hopper painting that I think we can map to street photography as a genre, and how I think that studying Hopper's work can improve your photography. And what I've done to demonstrate this is select a few of my photos that I feel, in my humble opinion, could almost be Hopper paintings. And I've had a little bit of fun in Photoshop with the dry brush filter and turned them into some approximation of what they might have looked like had Hopper actually painted them. But you came here for street photography tips, not art appreciation, so let's get into it. One of the things that made Hopper's work so special is his ability to make you feel like an unnoticed onlooker in a scene. The characters that he painted exist in their own little world. They're not aware of you as the viewer. They're not looking into the camera, so to speak. And what you'll notice about a lot of good street photography is that it does the same thing. I know some people personally who would argue in favor of eye contact being a really important part of a photo, but that's not something that I personally seek out. But Hopper rendered this part of the composition so eloquently. Everything about his paintings is so mundane and ordinary and plausible, and it makes you feel like you are observing somebody in their natural state of being, how they might naturally interact with their surroundings. And so where many painters would embellish, I believe that Hopper simply wanted to highlight. So this is one photograph of mine that I chose as an example for this video that I think demonstrates that point pretty well. Here you have three subjects, two women in the back having a conversation with one another, and then one obviously sitting and eating in the sunshine. As a viewer, when you see this image, there's no eye contact from the subjects. And there's also nothing that makes this scene particularly out of the ordinary. It's just characters clearly engaged in very relatable human acts that we've all been a part of one way or another. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how to find subjects that look like they could be Hopper subjects, that look like they could be in a Hopper painting. While many street photographers are in constant pursuit of subjects that stand out, I am often more drawn to the ones who don't. But the other side of this is that you, as the photographer, have the power to make ordinary people stand out, to make ordinary people into the main character of a composition. After years of looking at Hopper's work, I can say that that's precisely what he did. Again, like we talked about, very mundane, very ordinary, very relatable subjects. And we'll talk about some of those things in a moment, but first, what are some of the things that you can do to find Hopper-esque subjects out in the real world? The very first basic piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, is a subject or subjects who are actively existing in their environment. It's really hard to engage with your surroundings if you're staring at an iPhone. So when you are lucky enough to find a subject who is awake, so to speak, engaged with another human being, looking at something in the environment, looking up, looking to the side, not just straight down at this phone in their hand, run with it. This is an example of a scene that I feel like doesn't work particularly well as a quote-unquote Hopper-esque photo. Here you have three subjects who are all kind of clearly in their own world. And there's an argument to be made that perhaps this is still a good street photo, capturing these three people all engrossed in what they're doing. And the reason that I don't think that this is a very good example of a quote-unquote Hopper-esque photo is that not only is it clearly a chain coffee shop, which kind of breaks the immersion a little bit, but all of our subjects are engrossed in their own world, not engaged in the world around them. Just quickly, this is another example of a photo that I feel like doesn't work very well. Maybe it's still a decent street photo, but you have a subject here who is actively avoiding being a part of anything around them. They have headphones on, they're staring into a phone. Now, on the contrary, I feel like this is a very good example of a Hopper-esque composition. Here you have some information to work with. You have a subject who is engaged in their surroundings. And when I say information to work with, you can clearly tell that this is a barber shop. You can tell that he is a barber because he has an apron on. And then you also have some information about what it is that's caught his attention. You can see the mirrors where he would be cutting somebody's hair. He's clearly not focused on that side of the barbershop. So what is he looking at off into the distance? The fact that you can't see it, I think adds some intrigue. Maybe he's watching a game on a TV that's mounted to the wall behind the workstations, but you'll never know. And I think it causes the viewer to ask questions, to maybe consider the scene for more than just a moment. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is isolation, and not in the metaphorical, psychological sense, though there is certainly an argument to be made that many of the subjects that Hopper painted do seem to be lonely or isolated in the scenes that they're a part of. But rather, what I'm talking about here is isolating your subjects physically, compositionally, ideally in a way that directs your viewers' attention to what it is about the scene you want them to notice. In the examples I've given so far that I feel work well, it's very easy to focus on what I want the viewer to see. In my view, that's because my subjects in these examples are clear, legible, isolated elements in a composition that is relatively free from distractions. To give you some practical tips, I think some things you'll want to avoid in your attempts to make more Hopper-like compositions are clutter, junk, unnecessarily busy scenes. You'll want to seek out kind of plain, minimal frames with color harmony, with simple compositions, lighting that is fairly flat, not too dramatic, not too harsh. Basically eliminating things that are clashing or calling your viewers' attention away from what it is that you're trying to highlight. And sometimes it's as easy as this example. This was taken in the West Village in New York. And I think what's interesting here is that while this is a very kind of cluttered interior to a coffee shop, what simplifies the scene a little bit is the color harmony here. You have chairs and tables and these bags of what might be coffee or flour in the back, but everything is shades of cream, beige, tan. Even though there's a bunch going on in the middle and the left-hand side of the image, it's not taking away from the viewer's ability to focus on my subject who's framed on the right. And to make one final callback to the prior tips that I've talked about, he is clearly engaged in something. Maybe that is his phone, but it's out of frame. So we'll never actually know for sure, but I choose to believe maybe it's a newspaper or a book, or maybe he's simply dozed off and he's actually sleeping there in the corner, which would make for an even more interesting composition. But the fact that we don't know for sure causes the viewer to ask questions, to stop and think. Here, what I saw is the geometric balance of those window frames and the color harmony, and then my subject, who is very clearly just a gentleman sitting in a coffee shop, something that pretty much any viewer can relate to. It takes practice. I think that this is one of the things about street photography that you learn more from putting in your 10,000 hours, putting in your 100,000 shots, and just wearing out the soles in your shoes, walking up and down the same streets and trying to work scenes differently, trying to simplify the chaos and getting better compositionally over time. But I hope that some of the things I've talked about in this video, some of the elements that I've taken from Hopper's work, his paintings over the years, can inspire you and can help you in seeking out those scenes and understanding better what to look for and how to compose the scene when you do find it. And remember that as a photographer, you have the ability to curate and to direct the viewer's attention to whatever it is you want them to focus on. If something's not working how you want it to, try a different angle, try a different focal length, take a step back, take a step forward, whatever it might be, but play around with it, I think that there's often more than one way to present a scene, and even if you come away with a photo that's not a Hopper-ish photo, that doesn't mean it can't still be a great street photo. Without further ado, without any more rambling on my part, I hope that this was helpful in some small way to you. And if it was, please help me out with the good old YouTube algorithm. Comment, like, subscribe. You guys know the drill. And thank you, as always, for watching. I will see you in the next one.